The sound of the whip cracking against the dusty ground echoed through the entire village, silencing the crowd instantly. "Thief!" roared Lord Bastion, his face purple with rage. He pointed a trembling finger at the small, shivering boy kneeling in the dirt. 7-year-old Elias held nothing but a handful of spilled grain, grain he had scraped from the mud to feed his starving sister. "You dare steal from my granary?" Bastion shouted, towering over the child. "This is my land, my law. If you take even a single grain without paying, you pay with your life." The villagers watched in horror, too afraid to speak. Bastion raised his hand to strike the boy, but Elias's father, a frail man named Thomas, threw himself over his son. "Mercy, my lord," Thomas cried. "He is just a child. He was hungry. Take me instead." Bastion sneered, a cruel glint in his eye. "Very well," he hissed. "Since you love him so much, you will pay his debt. You are hereby banished to the Black Mountains. If I see your face in this valley again, you will not leave alive." He kicked them both into the dust. "Go and take your worthless son with you." That day, as Elias watched his father limp away from the only home they had ever known, a fire was lit in his heart. Not a fire of revenge, but a fire of justice that would one day burn brighter than the sun. The journey to the Black Mountains was a death sentence for most, but Thomas and Elias had no choice. They walked for days, their feet bleeding, their stomachs empty. The wind in the mountains howled like wolves, and the nights were so cold that the air felt like broken glass in their lungs. Thomas, already weak from years of hard labor, grew frailer with each step. He coughed blood into the snow, but he never let Elias see his pain. "Keep walking, my son," he would whisper, squeezing Elias's hand. "The mountain is steep, but the view from the top is worth it. Never forget who you are. You are not a thief. You are a survivor." They found shelter in a small, abandoned cave near a frozen stream. For months they lived like wild animals. Elias learned to catch fish with his bare hands, to find edible roots under the frost, and to read the signs of the weather. But winter was cruel. One night a fever took hold of Thomas. He lay on the bed of dry leaves, his breath shallow. He pulled Elias close. "Listen to me," he rasped. "Lord Bastion thinks he owns the world because he has gold. But gold is heavy, Elias. It drags a man's soul down to hell. True power is in the hand that gives, not the hand that takes. Promise me you will never let greed poison your heart." Elias wept, holding his father's cold hand until the morning light broke. When the sun rose, Elias was alone. He buried his father under a pile of gray stones. He stood there for a long time, the silence of the mountains his only companion. He was just a boy, but the mountains had forged him into iron. He wiped his tears, looked at the horizon, and made a vow. He would survive, and he would return. 12 years passed. The boy who had been banished was now a legend in the coastal cities beyond the mountains. Elias had not just survived, he had thrived. He started by carrying heavy sacks at the docks, working harder than 3 men combined. He saved every copper, ate simple bread, and spent his nights learning to read and count. His honesty became his trademark. Merchants trusted him with their most valuable cargo because they knew Elias would rather die than steal. One scorching afternoon, while Elias was inspecting a shipment of spices, he saw a commotion near the market square. A foreign prince, traveling in disguise, had dropped a leather satchel. A crowd of beggars and thieves rushed towards it, fighting like jackals. But Elias pushed through the crowd, his strength immense. He grabbed the satchel, protecting it with his body. The thieves drew knives. "Give it to us," they screamed. "It's full of jewels." Elias stood his ground, his eyes calm. "It belongs to the man who lost it," he said, his voice deep and steady. He fought them off, taking a slash to his arm, but he did not yield. He ran after the prince's carriage, blood dripping from his arm. When he handed the satchel back, the prince was stunned. He opened it to reveal the royal seal, an item worth more than the entire city. "You bled to return this to me?" the prince asked, looking at Elias's wound. "You could have sold this and bought a kingdom. Why?" Elias looked the prince in the eye. "My father told me that gold is heavy, my lord. I prefer to travel light." The prince smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Then come with me. I do not need more servants. I need a grand vizier who cannot be bought." While Elias rose to power in the capital, back in the valley, Lord Bastion's life was rotting from the inside out. His greed had become a sickness. He taxed the villagers until they starved. He seized their lands, their cattle, even their winter coats. He built a wall around his mansion, terrified that someone would steal his fortune. He trusted no one. He banished his own brother, fired his loyal servants, and locked his gold in a cellar that only he could open. But fate has a sense of irony. A terrible drought struck the valley. The river dried up, the crops turned to dust, and the cattle died. Bastion's granaries were full, but he refused to share. "Let them eat grass," he shouted from his balcony. "This is my grain." The villagers fled the valley, leaving it a ghost town. Bastion was left alone in his massive mansion, surrounded by his gold, but with no food, no water, and no servants to cook for him. Desperation set in. Bastion tried to eat his gold, but metal does not fill the belly. He tried to drink his wine, but without water it only made him thirstier. He wandered his empty halls, screaming at the shadows, his mind cracking under the weight of his own selfishness. He was the richest man in the valley, and he was dying of hunger. Finally, hearing rumors of a great magistrate arriving in the nearby region to distribute food, Bastion gathered his remaining strength. He filled a sack of gold coins, a king's ransom, and began to crawl towards the city. He looked like a skeleton draped in silk, a pathetic monument to greed. Elias, now the grand magistrate of the realm, sat in his tent, overseeing the distribution of grain to the famine-struck refugees. His face was stern but kind. He recognized many of the villagers, people who had watched him being banished years ago. He gave them food, clothes, and land deeds, asking for nothing in return. Suddenly, a commotion arose at the back of the line. A withered old man was pushing people aside, waving a sack of gold. "Let me through," the old man rasped. "I have money. I can pay. I am Lord Bastion. I demand to see the magistrate." The guards blocked his path, but Elias raised his hand. "Let him approach," he commanded. Bastion stumbled forward and threw the sack of gold onto Elias's table. The coins spilled out, glittering in the sun. "Here, Bastion wheezed, his eyes wild. "Gold, pure gold. Take it all. Just give me a sack of grain. Please, I am starving." Elias looked at the gold. Then he looked at the man. He saw the cruel tyrant who had destroyed his family, now reduced to a beggar. The memory of the whip, the banishment, and his father's death flashed before his eyes. He stood up slowly. The villagers held their breath. They knew who Elias was. They waited for him to draw his sword. They waited for revenge. Elias picked up a single grain of wheat from a bowl on his table. He held it up to the light. "Do you remember, my lord?" Elias asked softly. "Years ago, you banished a boy and his father for a handful of this. You said your law was absolute." Bastion squinted, confusion clouding his eyes. Then he looked at Elias's face. The recognition hit him like a physical blow. His knees buckled. "You," he whispered in horror, "the thief's son." "No," Elias corrected him gently, "the survivor's son." Bastion fell to the dirt, covering his head, expecting the executioner's blade. "Kill me," he sobbed. "I killed your father. I destroyed your life. I deserve to die." Elias walked around the table. He stood over Bastion. The silence was deafening. "My father died in a cave because of you," Elias said, his voice trembling with emotion. "For years I imagined this moment. I imagined seeing you suffer." Elias reached down. He took Bastion's hand, the same hand that had held the whip. He pulled the old man to his feet. "But if I let you die of hunger while I have food," Elias said, looking deep into Bastion's soul, "then I become you, and that is a fate worse than death." Elias turned to his servants. "Take this man, bathe him, feed him, and give him a bed." He pushed the sack of gold back towards Bastion. "And take your metal. It has no value here. In this tent, the only currency is mercy." Bastion stood there, weeping uncontrollably. The gold lay untouched on the table. He realized then that the boy he had banished had returned not to conquer his land, but to conquer his hate. Bastion lived the rest of his days in a monastery, serving the poor, trying to wash the stain from his soul. And Elias ruled for many years, a leader who knew that the strongest heart is the one that can forgive the unforgivable.